Hello and welcome to Get Hired Live. I'm Gianna Prudenti, LinkedIn's Associate News Editor for Jobs and Career Development. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope your week is off to a great start. To kick off the show, I want to encourage you to introduce yourself in the comments. Let us know where you're tuning in from. If you're open to work and feel comfortable sharing, let us know what positions or roles you're targeting, and make sure you're connecting with people throughout the show who are in those positions in those fields. We want you to get all your questions answered in our time together, but we also want this to be an opportunity for you to grow your network and build your community. Now, speaking of questions, our goal is for the show to be super interactive. So make sure you're sharing all your questions in the comments throughout, and we'll answer them live. Now, if you're part of the Get Hired community, you know that Andrew's been doing things just a little bit differently. Each week on his Get Hired podcast, he speaks with a guest, and that guest then joins the live show the following week to talk more about that topic and answer all of your questions. Now, this week, Andrew sat down with Harleny Vasquez, who is a social career coach, to talk about something we all can relate to, and that's interview anxiety. So, joining me today to talk more about that topic and answer all your questions is Harleny. Harleny, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday, of course. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm so excited for our conversation today. And to get us started, I'd love if you could share a little bit about what it is that makes so many of us nervous when it comes to job interviews.
Absolutely. I mean, the first thing that I definitely want to mention is mindset. We all have, many of us, including myself, so many limiting beliefs that can really hinder our particular interview experience. So, right before we're going to an interview, we may be thinking, I'm not enough, I don't have the proper skills, or I don't sound smart enough. So, there's already a lot of pressure that can, be put on oneself before going to an interview. So, it's truly, truly important to give yourself a little bit of grace and recognize that they called you, they're interested in you, they know exactly all of the current skills that you currently have to offer in that very moment.
That mindset piece is so important, and having positive self-talk to really boost your confidence, going into that interview. I want to say a quick hello to some members joining us. We have Dr. Sepram from Mexico, Paul from the UK, Tanya from South Carolina, Yolanda from Texas, Lizette from New York, Madeline in Long Island, Shine from Uganda, James in New Jersey. Thank you all so much for joining us. So, Harlan, you talked a bit about that mindset piece before the interview, getting your mindset right. Are there any, steps aside from that you recommend job seekers take before an interview to ease those pre-interview jitters?
Absolutely. Well, number one, I definitely recommend doing a career inventory, what I often tell my clients to do. Basically, having your resume and really going experience by experience, identifying those unique skills, those unique strengths in relation to the type of role that you want to obtain, and really building your self esteem, really building that confidence to be able to market yourself effectively. Because the honest truth is that anxiety stems from the unknown, that sense of, not feeling really secure within your own particular skill set. So the best way to kind of decrease that anxiety is by giving yourself the information you need to be able to step into this sense of confidence and empowerment, because confidence sells. You have to be able to go into an interview being able to identify those key things that truly are going to set you apart.
You mentioned this idea of, getting an understanding of what you're walking into, right? Knowing your skills, owning that, and making that your selling point. I wonder also, do you recommend that job seekers maybe reach out to the company ahead of time and say, can you let me know who I'm interviewing with, or what the format of the resume of the interview will be, to get a better idea of what they're walking into?
Absolutely. You should, just like you're doing research and really finding out more about the company, the mission, the role, you should 110% feel comfortable and confident enough to reach out to the hiring manager or to the recruiter and really assess, what are you currently walking into? If there's 4 rounds of interviews, especially for me, for my fellow social workers, sometimes if they're going to be going for a clinical interview, there's sometimes a clinical assessment. So you also want to make sure that you have as much information ahead of time to be able to decrease that sense of overwhelm.
Absolutely. And I'm sure if they're able to tell you, who you're interviewing with, you can go on LinkedIn, look that person up, see if you have any commonalities to kind of break the ice in a sense when you do enter that interview. So I think that's some really great advice. Want to say hello to a few more members joining us. We have Leo in Argentina to phone in. Atlanta, Sweta in Canada, and Eric in Ghana. Thank you all for joining us. Like I mentioned earlier in the show, we'll get to your questions, so make sure you're getting those in the comments throughout. Now, Harleni, how do you know when it comes to interviews if you're prepared enough? Is there such thing? How do you know when you're done with that prep?
Great question. So here's the thing, that feeling is going to feel different for everyone. There can be people that have the opportunity to prep 2 weeks in advance as much as they can. But then sometimes, as we know, life happens and you may get called for interview for that same week. So I always say, if really you're able to identify your unique skills, your strengths, but most importantly, not just memorizing or not just really gathering information, but how do you make your own self feel very assured in your current self for that role. You need to be able to visualize yourself in that role. So when you attend that interview, you're able to knock down all of the points as best as you can. But the reality is, you always have to be able to check in with yourself. And of course, do not rely on an employer or a particular role to really give you that sense of self-worth. You need to first be able to identify that within yourself to then be able to confidently market yourself when you attend interviews.
I love that idea of picturing yourself in the role and bringing that mindset to the interview. That's very, I feel like that is just a great way to boost your confidence and make you just feel like you're owning your stuff, you know what you're talking about, and you're presenting your worth and in a really strong way. Obviously, interview anxiety happens before the interviews, but also during it. Maybe you're asked a question that you don't know the answer to. So, what's your advice on calming those anxieties that occur during the interview?
Absolutely. Well, I will first say, take a deep moment to just pause, take a deep breath, because here's the honest truth as well. The interviewer is not out there to get you, right? It's really coming from a place of they're just gathering information. So if you get a question and you're like, oh my God, I have no idea how to answer this, take a moment to pause, take a deep breath, and saying, that's a great question. Let me take a moment to think about it, so then you can gather your thoughts, because sometimes, the anxiety will kick in, and sometimes we feel that we need to answer the question right away, and then that can make us, ramble or stumble on our words. So we just want to make sure that we take a pause, gather our thoughts, and be able to answer that question with ease as best as you can, of course.
And that brings me to my next question. I was planning to ask because it's something I know I'm definitely guilty of. When I'm feeling nervous, I ramble, I lose train of my thought. I'm like, where is this sentence going? How do I, bring it back in? So what's your advice on not freezing up and rambling during interviews? Because I feel like when it comes to being anxious and nervous, those are the two things that happen.
Absolutely. I mean, I will first say that if you're someone you that has interview anxiety, I mean, we all go through it. The first thing I want you to know is that you're not alone. This happens to everyone, including myself. It's most important to be able to recognize, okay, I know going into this interview I'm going to feel anxious, I'm going to feel nervous, so let me prepare for that rather than trying to run away from it. I also sometimes get so excited and I tend to speak really fast sometimes. So it's also about getting a sense of who you are, especially when answering questions. So you also want to make sure that if it's happening, pay attention to your body language. If you're answering a question and you feel yourself very tense up, then maybe if you're on Zoom, maybe squeeze your hand. If you're in person, as well, try to have your hands on your lap. But you also want to be able to be in tune with your body language and be able to regulate your emotions in that moment as best as you can, but reminding yourself this is just a conversation. I'm here to answer questions, but I'm also able to assess as well, because you're also in control.
You just mentioned something about in-person interviews versus virtual. And I think that brings up, a good question of should your preparation change when it comes to virtual interviews versus in person? Obviously, the nerves are a little bit different when you're behind a screen, or maybe it's a screening interview and there's like a countdown. I know I've encountered those a few times when I was going after internships, and those are definitely nerve-wracking. So does the preparation change when it comes to different types of interviews?
Absolutely. I mean, if you're at home or, in a local coffee shop, wherever you're having an interview, if you're having it through Zoom, there's a lot of factors are going to go into play. Whether it's your internet access, whether is are you in a safe space, in a safe environment that you're able to relay your skills, in a calm state of mind. But most importantly, again, technology is also a huge emphasis in your interview, but also the way you show up. Just because you're at home doesn't mean you shouldn't can still dress up for an interview. So there's also a lot of preparation that's going to be taking into play a little bit more. And of course, when you're traveling to an interview, you're traveling, you're commuting, all of that is going to impact your anxiety, especially if you're stuck in traffic, if you're taking a train. So you also want to be able to prepare even more in advance. If you're able to get to at least the interview location 30 minutes, an hour before, especially if you're someone that you need to kind of ground yourself after maybe a tough commute, a tough morning, whatever it is, you want to be able to take all of those factors into consideration.
I can so relate to that. And I think anytime I'm going to an in-person interview, I'll be showing up 2 hours early just to, avoid any traffic and calm my nerves ahead of time. That's a really good piece of advice. We have a comment here from our member, Sarah, that I think is helpful to bring up. She says, it helps if the person interviewing is open to a more natural dialogue. And I think that brings up a good point. Because if the interviewer is being rigid, should you follow their lead? If they're being more casual during the interview, should you, match that energy? What do you recommend doing there when it comes to kind of the energy you're getting from the interviewer?
Absolutely. I mean, one thing that I often tell, clients is that yes, obviously in this market, everyone is looking for a job. At the end of the day, you have to do what's best for you. But if you're currently in a position where you're able to be selective in the type of environment that you're going to go after, for a particular role, then you can never lose sight of that. Because if you're in an interview and you feel so tense, you feel like choking up, that you're not able to be your authentic self, as for me, that should be a red flag, right? You should be able to be in an environment where you're going to feel at ease, where you're going to feel like this is a place where I see myself, right? And of course, every interviewer, every employer is different. But I always say, again, going back to what I said about mindset, in an interview, you shouldn't rely on someone's body language or tone of voice to validate how you're doing. You should be able to validate that for yourself. Because sometimes, let's say for me, I am a huge extrovert. Let's say you go to an interview and you're extrovert and then the interviewer is an introvert and then it doesn't align, then you're going to be like, what's wrong with me? I'm being, too over the top or anything like that, or vice versa. So it's very important for you to first assess the type of person that you are, where your strengths align, and making sure that environment is the right fit for you.
Absolutely. And you know what? I love that you brought that up because I feel like I'm definitely somebody who feeds off of other people's energy a lot. So I think if I was being interviewed and the person wasn't, having the same energy as me, it would probably make me freak out in the middle of it. So really just
Absolutely.
knowing your worth. And like you said, that's what it always comes back to. And knowing and owning your worth is so key during those moments. And, I think kind of in the same vein that of what we're talking about now is this idea of interviews making you feel like you're in the hot seat. When you're going in, you feel like I'm just going to be interrogated. There's all these questions that are going to be thrown my way. So, what's your advice on facilitating a two-way conversation during the interview?
Of course. I mean, the topic of today is mindset shift. You need to be able to go into that interview reminding yourself that even though it's going to feel like you're in the hot seat, you can do the same for them. You can ask some questions about, the company culture, about onboarding, about what their ideal candidate looks like. Like, don't be afraid to shift that perspective on them as well, because you're interviewing them. Remember, you have non-negotiables, you have your own goal, you have your own mission and vision, and you also want to ensure that the employer that you're trying to work for aligns with all of that. So never lose sight, and always remember you're an asset as well. They need you more than you need them. I mean, that's the mantra that I tell my clients to say.
I love that. That's such a good reframe and something to repeat like right before the interview. Have that written down if it's a virtual interview. And we have Carl in the comments saying that awesome advice, Harleni. So he's appreciating everything you're sharing. I want to remind everyone to get your questions in. We're going to get to those in just a bit. So make sure you're getting all your questions in on interview anxiety. I know it's something that so many of us experience. And James is saying, so I guess this is his ritual before an interview, which I love. He says, I practice most common interview questions beforehand, especially my elevator pitch. If I nail that, it promotes my confidence. Absolutely. And I love the idea of elevator pitch. And like, that's a great way to kind of wrap your career story up and sell yourself in a way, know your worth. Do you have any advice there when it comes to crafting an elevator pitch before an interview?
Absolutely. I mean, the first thing is always being in tune with your why. When it comes to your elevator pitch, a few things are going to come into consideration. Number one, being able to do a brief recap of your experience in relation to the type of role that you're trying to obtain, but also never losing sight of that why, of your passion. Because when it comes to elevator pitch, it's basically within a few seconds. And if you're able to, really prepare beforehand, you're going to be able to go into the interview feeling as confident as possible. So you're probably thinking, Harleni, how am I going to get this information? Going back to what I said before, having a career inventory of your previous experience, identifying how it aligns with the current role that you're trying to obtain. But of course, the job description is going to highlight their ideal candidate. So that is also an opportunity for you to have that information beforehand. Remember, you have enough, as much information as you think you need before an interview to be able to, prepare as much as you can.
Absolutely. And I think also when you're crafting that elevator pitch, like you said, telling your career story, I think there's parts of certain people's career that might make them a little apprehensive ahead of an interview. Maybe they were recently laid off or they have a career gap on their resume. Obviously, that's part of their career story. So how do you recommend, answering questions? Maybe it's about a resume gap or you were recently laid off and you're asked about that. How do you answer the questions that maybe you're nervous to answer?
Yeah, so I think again, going back to, if you're able to take the time to do that career inventory, then you're going to have awareness of those particular triggers. I mean, think about it. An interview, it's a trigger, it's an experience that unfortunately happened. So you want to be able to utilize your voice, rewrite your narrative, right? Unfortunately, those circumstances happened, but you're able to already have awareness. It's not like you're going to go to an interview and they're going to be like, there's no way they're not going to ask me that. Yes, they are. So if you have that information, you're able to have the awareness beforehand. You're like, you know what? If they're going to ask me about me getting laid off or me taking time off or whatever it was, then I have that information and I'm going to feel, confident enough to be able to just really explain what happened. Awareness is key, but preparation is key as well. You can also record yourself on Zoom, practicing by yourself before an interview. You can speak to yourself in front of the mirror, ask a colleague, ask, a family friend. Practice answering these questions so it doesn't get thrown at you, feel like it's like a last minute thing.
Yeah, it all comes back to that preparation so you don't feel like you're caught off guard. Obviously, there's still going to be times in an interview when you do feel that way. And we have a question here from Trang who kind of goes off that idea of maybe something comes up that you don't know how to navigate in the interview. They ask, how do you respond to questions in an interview that you don't know the answers to? What's your advice there?
Well, honesty is key. Obviously, you should not be going into an interview and saying that you have X, Y, and Z skill when you don't. The biggest thing is that, okay, you go to an interview and you're like, wow, I have no idea what that system is, or I don't know how to have this particular experience, or whatever it is. The way it's not how what you say is how you say it. So it's really coming from that place of, unfortunately at this time I don't have experience in X, Y, and Z. However, going back to identifying your unique skills, I am someone that's very eager to learn. I am a fast learner. I'm able to implement with ease, whatever it is, right? But again, going back to prior to an interview, yes, you never know if they're going to really ask you, but at least some of the main things of the role, whether it's a database, whether it's a certain skill set, you should be able to see it in the job description and identify, like, they're definitely going to ask me about this. So I want to make sure that I feel comfortable and confident enough to explain how I'm able to basically be open minded to learn that particular skill set or gain that experience.
Yeah, and like you said earlier, you can take pauses throughout the interview so you don't feel like you need to answer right away. So really taking a step back, gathering your thoughts and saying, and just being honest, like you said, is definitely very important in those situations. Arlene, I want to say hi to some more members joining us. We have Chester in Texas, Nan in Denver, Oseas in Brazil, Ali in California, Marlenis in North Carolina, Edwin from Iowa. Thank you all so much for joining us. If you have any questions on interview anxiety, make sure you're getting those in the comments and we will answer them right now. We have a question here kind of in this, on the same topic from Kathy. They asked, if you don't understand a question, how do you respond? Is that something you could just say, I don't know the answer? How do you really navigate that if you're totally stumped?
Absolutely. There is no, you can say, would it be possible to reframe that question? Are you able to give me an example? Like, don't be afraid to ask for clarity, because again, you don't want to sit in that sense of overwhelm and unknown. Like, I don't know how to answer this question, or kind of going into rambling, like, I don't know, right? So you also want to make sure there is nothing wrong with asking for clarification.
And we have a question here from Stacy and a few others, which I think goes back to the idea of preparation. Are you prepared enough? They're asking, how do you get over the fear of not knowing enough about the role? What's your advice there?
Absolutely. So I think it really has so many different factors are in place, right? So if let's say you got called for an interview maybe 2 weeks ago and you're going to be preparing, right? The honest truth, like we said before, you're not ever going to know every single question that they're going to ask you. But the number one thing that you can assure yourself is these are the current skills that I have to offer in this time. What I don't know, I will learn. And of course, if you end up getting calls for an interview last minute, then you also want to ask yourself, what are the resources and information that I have in this very moment? And how can I be okay with that? Because when it comes to adding that interview anxiety, if you end up sitting with those thoughts that I'm not good enough, I didn't prep, or I'm not the best fit for that person, then you're going to self sabotage yourself before going to an interview. So the best thing that you can do is, again, use your own self as a resource and validate the current skills that you have. Because again, the biggest shift, again, as a career coach, even as a current recruiter, I'd rather speak to a candidate that's going to showcase, like, okay, I don't have experience in this, but this is what I'm currently doing to gain this skill set, or this is what I'm willing to do, rather than feel like you need to lie or you need to overcompensate for that experience.
Yeah, and when you're thinking about this idea of changing your mindset, showing that it's a growth mindset or a learner's mindset is so attractive as a candidate. So I think that's some really great advice. And we have a question here from Nan who asks, how do you handle it when the interviewers are much younger than you? What's your advice there?
Absolutely. So, if you're able to, there's going to be a few different factors, right? Sometimes when you get an interview that's scheduled, right, then hopefully you'll have everyone's name. If not, you can ask the hiring manager, the recruiter, are you able to tell me, who are going to be, especially if it's a panel interview, who are going to be the people that I'm going to be interviewing? Obviously, come on LinkedIn and see if you can search them, or search the company to see if you can have at least some sort of information beforehand of who's going to be on the panel, right? Based their level of experience, their age, and all those things. But honestly, the biggest topic, y'all, is mindset. Because again, in a resume, the honest truth is that they're looking at your experience, right? In a resume, you're not putting how old you are or how long you had this particular skill, depending what area of practice you are in, of course. But you have to also have that mindset shift for yourself. Like, they called me, they're interviewing. I know that at the end of the day, I don't know what's going to happen in that interview room or Zoom room. But the only thing that I can take control over is how I view myself and my current skill set, regardless of all these factors that, can hinder how I view my own current skill set. So it's something that's honestly, with repetition, you're going to be able to just build that confidence over time. I understand that sometimes those limiting beliefs or imposter syndrome can take over, but the biggest advice that I can have for you is, how can you reassure your current skill set today with what you currently have to offer in this very moment, regardless of your entire career journey?
You absolutely have to hype yourself up before the interview and hopefully support yourself, surround yourself with a support system who can do that for you as well. And we talked a lot about easing nerves before and during the interview, but of course those anxieties do not subside just because the interview is over. I think a lot of times when you're waiting to hear back on a hiring decision, you still are feeling those nerves. So do you recommend job seekers maybe at the end of the interview say, what's the timeline on the hiring decision? How do you recommend that they ease those post-interview anxieties?
Yeah, so definitely act just like they're asking you questions. Even before attending an interview, you should already have some awareness of the type of questions you're going to ask them. But absolutely, what do the next steps look like? By when are you looking to fill the role? Or what does your ideal candidate look like? Like, don't be afraid to, again, step and empower yourself, pretty much, of course, the licensed social worker here, speaking from mindset and all those things. I mean, really being able to leave that interview like, you know what, I gave it my all. I was able to, I know exactly when should I hear back. And of course, you should be able to follow up, send a thank you email within 24 hours, just making sure that you thank them and all those stuff. But of course, Once you get home, or unless you turn off the computer, you should also be able to reflect on how you did in that interview process, because of course there's always room for improvement.
Yeah, and even if you look back, I mean, we're all human. We all make mistakes. We've done, I've made my fair share myself. And when you look back on those experiences, those, it's just data to kind of inform your next interview. So if you don't get that job or you're going after another interview, you just can learn from that experience and bring, your improved self to the next one. So really great advice. And thank you so much, Harleni. I know that our members got so much value out of this conversation, and we've been flashing your LinkedIn profile at the bottom of the screen. So hopefully they'll give you a follow for all your great content on LinkedIn.
Thank you so much for having me. And yes, y'all, make sure to follow me, connect with me, and I'm here to elevate job seekers.
And thank you all so much for joining me today. This week on Andrew's Get Hired podcast, he sat down with Cynthia Pong, who is a career coach and founder of Embrace Change, to talk about bridge jobs. You can find the episode wherever you like to listen to podcasts when it's live this Wednesday, March 1st. And to answer all your questions about bridge jobs, Cynthia will be joining my LinkedIn News colleague, Brandy Fowler, on next week's episode of Get Hired Live. That's Monday, March 6th at noon Eastern Time. You can RSVP to the show using the link in the comments. Thank you all so much again for joining me today. I hope you have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next time.